Vanakkam, Namaste, and blessings to everyone. This is Dr. Bhairavi Balasubramanian, PhD, the Sky Priestess. So, today we're going to be talking about creativity and finding one's path of service. It's been, again, another theme that's been coming up over and over again in my clients. And when I see this happening as a pattern, I know, okay, there's probably something happening with the collective with respect to this. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. And I just want to make sure that this is streaming because YouTube does not always like me. So, oh, here we go. Synchronistic Ghost has just confirmed that I am live. Thank you, Synchronistic Ghost. I love the name. Absolutely love the name. Okay, so as I was saying, today we are looking at creativity and why it's so important. So, what I find, especially with people who are really thinking about, which direction to go, what route they need to take, where, are they best placed in this world, it usually boils down to this idea that unless you are struggling and empathizing with those who are suffering the most in the world, unless you're doing that, you're not really in some form of service. You're being self-indulgent or selfish or whatever, whatever, whatever. That tends to be a script that I see in a lot of people. And whilst there's been, in recent years, there's been a lot more awareness of the causes of social justice, of an awareness of trauma, and understanding that, there are certain identities whose voices are not heard, whose voices are not recognized. There's been a lot more awareness put to this, and a lot of people are working very, very, very hard to try and bring back that sense of balance. But here's the thing, that's not the only way you can serve. That's not the only way you can be helpful in this world. So I've seen quite a few people now who get torn between the idea of, well, I want to extend my hand to the suffering, but at the same time, there is this creative project that I absolutely love and want to do. Am I betraying the cause by doing this? Am I putting myself first and, leaving the suffering behind? And, a lot of these questions are very much relics from the age of Pisces, but they're relics that are still very current to those of us who are still working through that shift between Piscean to Aquarian thinking. And of course, we've all experienced in different ways the traumas and the baggage and the sheer greed that comes with living in a society where a lot of people have just gone me first, everyone else can go and die. And we're looking at that, at the effects of that in a structural way. But I would say there is a middle point. There is a middle point. There are extremes of being creative. There's being creative in a way that helps you rejuvenate yourself, which is very good. There's being creative in a way that helps you create works of art, fiction, music, whatever, that have an impact on people, and that's fantastic. And then there are creative people who end up going the extreme route where they become absolute divas, and their presence is God's gift to humanity. So there is a spectrum here, and very often we look at the ends of that spectrum and we go, oh, that's not what I want to do. But there are many other positions on it as well. This actually segues in something that I've been wanting to talk about for the past few days. And I actually find as one of the best examples of how creativity can actually be a viable path of service, a viable aspect of activism and social change. One of the projects that have inspired me the most, and this is not just because I'm a superhero fan, is of course Black Panther. And I was in the US when this film came out, and I was enthralled. I was like following things obsessively, going, oh my God, people are so happy. They're friends of mine who were also doing the same thing. People were so happy. And I actually, I think I mentioned this before, I wanted to go and see it in a, in a community theater, which in a predominantly Black neighborhood. But of course, my very anti-Black family of origin were like, no, you're going to get shot. And I'm like, seriously? But anyway, I still managed to see it in a place where there was some beautifully glamorous African American people that just came in, and I was just like, oh my God, it's so amazing. But anyway, so when I saw that film, and I saw it twice, I could feel a deep resonance in me because there is a deep connection between all of us. And communities and ethnicities that have had their land taken away from them, that they feel as though their glory is behind them or it never happened, they would have resonated very, very strongly with the message of the film. And it became a global phenomenon, a global level of awareness. Now, it's not just the film. If you look at behind the scenes, you look at who directed it, you looked at the way they networked and liaised and collaborated to create this fictional land, but one which was distinctively um, unique, one which actually managed to represent something that, quote unquote, didn't even actually exist, but still drew on universal themes that linked together the experience of so many people. And so, it was incredible, both on screen and behind the scenes. So if someone were to say, well, if me following my creative heart and my creative passion, and is that selfish? Is that something that I shouldn't be doing? I just point to Black Panther. I said, do you know how much change that film made? How it was probably, not looking at Black Lives Matter yet, because that came, I mean, that's been around, but that's really achieved, peak attention, in a very short span of time recently. But prior to that, as far as I know, people just showing up, bringing their fried chicken, dressing up, yelling back at the screen, having that sense of, we can sit in this space, we can have a good time, this is for us, we can celebrate what it means to be Black. I haven't seen that, and I've been following American social and political affairs ever since I was a kid. Don't ask me why, I just always did. I've never even heard of anything that came close. But that was a film. It wasn't someone who was necessarily like, sacrificing themselves day in and day out for the betterment of others in ways that blocked their creativity. No, it showcased that creativity, and that creativity healed and inspired. And in fact, it is even more poignant now because recently, it was a shock to everyone. The lead star of Black Panther, the man who played King T'Challa, Chadwick Boseman, he died of colon cancer. It took me a while to process, and I was wondering when I was going to speak about it, but I didn't just want to jump on the bandwagon, but to speak about it in a way that was deep and meaningful. I remember seeing him in another film called, I think it's called the Bloods, and it's this, and I remember seeing him in that film, and I was like, why are you so thin? And now I know why. So what I would say with that is it was very, very powerful for a lot of people, because what people then realized is this guy, whilst he was struggling this, he filmed Black Panther and all of these amazing projects whilst he knew he was already fighting colon cancer. So one of the most poignant things that came out of all of this is he never drew attention to it to himself. The directors claimed that nobody even knew that he was fighting this battle. And he actually went and cheered up kids in the cancer ward, and he was inspiring them. And there was one particular interview where, you know, he was talking about how he had met these two kids who were given, they were given a very short prognosis to live. And he was trying to make the movie and complete the project so that they could see it. And unfortunately, they passed away before they ever could. And he was in tears. I'm not trying to martyr this guy. I'm not trying to put him, on a pedestal in that sense. But even just each individual who participated in that project brought a certain magic, and that created this collective wave. And in fact, that wave was just re-intensified with his recent demise. And in fact, he was actually working on a book, if I'm not mistaken, on how to be an anti-racist, which is fantastic. But this is, in some sense, through a creative project, through a project that must have been born with a lot of love, a lot of vision, a lot of dedication. We actually saw something that created this collective understanding, this collective awareness that will have set a seed in the minds of anyone who saw it for a very, very long time to come. Because one of the things that people forget when they, I mean, and obviously a lot of people know this, but a lot of people also don't. One of the things that people forget when we're doing any kind of deeply transformative work in the world is that it's not just about the arguments. It's not about the moral or ethical argument of being able to prove your point when you are dealing with people who have never ever been able to imagine seeing themselves as the hero. Sometimes you've got to really bring that representation back in a very visual, in a very visceral way. And that's the power of the creative format. So don't limit your understanding of service to, I've got to counsel this person, I've got to teach them skills. Your creativity and vision can empower and inspire people, especially when, in a respectful way, if you have the consent and permission to do so, if it is your story to tell. All of this is important too. If in a respectful way, you can speak to a story that hasn't been spoken, that hasn't been represented. So, this is a very critical and beautiful interface where creativity and healing trauma and doing intersectional work and doing anti racist work can actually come together in a very, very powerful way. And of course, there are many other examples, but obviously, since the demise of Chadwick Boseman, this one has been particularly the forefront of my mind because it's not just about that individual, it's about the entire culture behind the scenes. Whereas I remember also reading, now just because I don't talk about the anti-racist struggles happening in the US all of the time, because there are lots of people who are doing that now, and I am one of those many voices. That does not mean that I'm not following things that are happening and the atrocities that continue happening each day. That's basically what I end up reading when I do have the time to read. So, I'm following what's happening, but alongside this, we're also seeing people beginning to understand the power of that symbol, and why it was so important. I mean, frankly, and I know some people might not like me saying this, but I feel that there's more to do with changing our relationship with the idea of finding an old sense of power, an old sense of hierarchy, an old sense of royalty. Um, and this is something that also applies to South Indians. We're hung up about some grand past that we've all forgotten about. It doesn't help. But that's something that, as a community, one has to come through years of doing that work and observing it, and so on and so forth. But yeah, it's like there is no real, there doesn't have to be this hard line between doing what you love, sharing a message that is potent and powerful, having fun with it, expressing what the story that you have inside of you, and actual service. That it doesn't have to be two separate things. What I usually tell people when they're kind of stuck in a situation where they feel like they have to choose between one path and another path, and that is something that's going to be coming up for more and more people, I always say choose the path in which you are not replaceable. Because a lot of the times, a lot of the skills we learn, these are things that other people can learn and other people can do. But when you're working on a creative vision, that's yours. And as long as you're not approaching that in a way that is full of ego, yes, obviously protect what you create. But as long as you're not approaching it as a means of ego, as a means of having your name on the billboard, pedestalizing whatever you're doing, as long as you're not approaching it from that space, you're probably going on a path which may be more challenging, may be more uncertain, but is something that allows your heart to shine its unique expression in the world. And that's what we need more of. That's, for me, the magic of the age of Aquarius. It is about allowing each individual to shine what is theirs. And for each individual to connect together and that collective to sing a symphony that is original. When you look at all of these pieces together, it's not about one person sitting on the hill. It's not about one person leading the way. It's that old understanding of the hero doesn't work, and it shouldn't work. Unfortunately, a lot of us are still working through, or maybe fortunately, I don't know, whichever way you want to look at it. But a lot of us are still working through very old ideas of service where you either got to be the hero, you got to be the villain, you got to be the avenger, you got to be the martyr, you got to be whatever, you got to be some fixed role, and that's it, you know? But that's not what it needs to be, not with the energetic shifts that are happening now. So, for those of you who are torn between those decisions, do I create or do I serve? Know that there is a middle path where you can have the best of both worlds. Just remember, don't, for those of you who are on a creative path, don't fall the path of the diva. That's not going to help anyone. And always remember to have a social and critical eye onto what you create and what you do and why you do it. And remember, some stories are not yours to be told. Some stories need to be handled by people who have not had the opportunity to tell their own story. And for those of you who are interested in the intellectual side of this, there is a very powerful but somewhat inaccessible article by an academic called Gayatri Spivak called, I believe it's called The Subaltern Speaks. Who Speaks for the Subaltern? There's a concept called the subaltern, which actually speaks about people who literally do not have the access or means to be represented in the first place. So it's very, very tricky to help them represent themselves without deconstructing that category. So for those of you interested in the intellectual side of things, check out Gayatri Spivak. But yeah, that's what I wanted to say with this. I mean, astrologically, there's always stuff going on. That's just the nature of things. There's always things happening. But I would say one of the reasons why this is probably on my mind and on other people's mind right now is because today we got the Sun trine Jupiter. We got to think about what are the parts of service that lead us to the legacies that we want to create, that we want to leave behind in the world. Your legacy doesn't have to be one of suffering, it can also be one of passion, creativity, joy, and bringing a moment, a real gift of collective awareness to all. That's about it. So that's what I got to say today. Those of you who are just joining in, catch the replay. And I hope this answers and clarifies some questions that some of you, at the very least, are bound to have. So that's about it. Take care and very many blessings. And hopefully, I can tune in with a hello neighbor not too long from now. But yeah, ciao ciao for now. Bye bye.